subject of organ donation, it's one of the serious, sometimes painful subject in Jewish law and the medical treatment and medical personnel. The question of organ donation is not only a question that people constantly ask. I can attest to the fact in the 21 years of my service as a community rabbi that those painful questions over disconnecting ventilator, respirator, disputation between the family members and medical personnel reoccur, unfortunately, many times. So therefore, the core of the springboard discussion is based on the page we're going to study today. But I would like to start with a clear disclaimer. Anything we're going to discuss today, it is not by any means to rule the halakha, the Jewish law, and people, those who are here and those who view us, shall always ask a permanent posek, a permanent rabbi, well-recognized, giant expert in this field, before making such a decision involved with people really life situation. So with that said, I would like to share with you some introduction. First and foremost is the Tzitz Eliezer. It was a great rabbi in Israel. I have the privilege to know him. Rabbi Waldenberg was a rabbinic judge, the head of court, and he wrote a responsa. It's called Tzitz Eliezer. It's a series of books that gives an answer to different painful questions, such as dialysis. Dialysis, the person who put in dialysis. But unfortunately, in those days, the state of Israel, the hospitals, doesn't provide enough machines. And the painful question will ask Rabbi Waldenberg, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, is what should we do? If we have several patients, some of them we knew that this dialysis can extend their lives, they have a highest chance to live longer, versus people who are in a way very close, at least in the way we understand, very close to the end. If you have this balance between two people to use one machine, should we use it for a person whom the life can extend it for longer, or you should use it whoever there, even someone who's the doctors not predicted a long lives? Obviously, in that question, based on our sugya, which we're going to study soon, Rav Waldenberg ruled that the one who has the longer chances is the one who's going to get it. But how we get to that decision is part of our discussions today. Another example, which unfortunately, as I said earlier, happened to me too many times. I don't know why it happens always in the middle of the night. People call me up, run to the hospital, family members around, disputation taking place. Most of the doctors give hope. They say that there's no hope for that person. They give up. One not long ago, some of you may remember, it was a young lady. She was with her son in the car. She was drunk, and Hopkins sent a helicopter. They break the roof. They pull her out. She was in a state of coma. It was a tragic event. Daughter of someone from the community. And the doctors give us hope. They said that is no way. Is a person in a state of coma, yes, miracles sometimes happen, but it's very unlikely. The family give up hope. And the question is, what should we do by halakha? Obviously, we all know that by the traditional Judaism, any active euthanasia is prohibited, but even passive one, in general statement, is prohibited. But if you have a case like that, when a family give up hope, and the doctors give up hope, what should we do next? So it's based on the subject we're going to discuss today, the subject of Rabbi Akiva and Ben Petura, the subject of two people have one jar of water walking in the desert. Is very little water left. One person carry the water, another person is not going to make it if he will not drink. Should we share it, or should one person will make it, the other one not? Furthermore, if it's a third party that can provide but only certain measurement of water, the question is who should take first? It's another serious question. But before we go to that subject, we have to complete the previous daf with several relatively short subjects. Since this parak, this chapter dealing with the law of interest, there are a few, again, vignette of points we're going to discuss before the subject of a mortgage. We explain in very general terms that the idea of heter iska, that the signing a contract between the lending institution with the rabbis in a certain term and condition, the lending institutions such as banks can have sometimes a opportunity to charge general public or people an interest. The problem in halacha is if you have a party that comes in and invested money within the institution by exchange of getting low interest rate. We call it ribit ktsutsa. Ribit ktsutsa is the oraita. It's a biblical and it's an issue, even with heter iska, to do it. So again, this is something we have to discuss. Another subject is a loan that some non-observant or all kind of circumstance person took a loan that have a interest, and is that perpetuated, meaning the children, after a person is not around, the children have the obligation, if their father borrow money or lend money with interest. So for example, if the father lend money with interest, the children have the obligation to return to those customers the money. Is that biblical? Is that rabbinic? The difference when it's come to return between rabbinic and biblical terms. So we are going to study here in Tractate Bava Metzia this fascinating page 62. We'll start with 61b, 13 lines from the bottom of the page. They said, Ve'ezehu tarbit. As we explained earlier in the session, the daf before, we said neshech is a biblical, it's like biting, and tarbit, we all remember, tarbit is rabbinic. So the Mishnah gives us example, and they said hamarbe beperot, one who increases his assets toward trading with produce or other goods. Keitzad, give me example. So they said lakach hemenu chitim bedinar zahav. So if someone brought wheat from a seller at the price of 1 gold dinar, so gold dinar, soon you see, it's a problematic. So now the Gemara asks, Atu kol hane de amrinan ashta lav ribitu? Amar Rabbi Abahu ad kan shel Torah mikan ve'elech shel divrehem. The question, and again, the Ritva said is not a question. The Ritva said, and others said it is just a statement. They said, but all those cases of neshech that we have mentioned up to now, meaning we have in the first clause, the first part of the Mishnah, is not considering a rebate and interest. So the Gemara on page 60b conclude that every case of neshech have a rebate as well. So he said we have to differentiate between one part that it's biblical, that's the reisha, ezeu neshech, and then the second part, the seifa, ezeu tarbit, that's rabbinic. Now, ואכן אמר רבא, עד כאן של תורה, מכאן ואילך של דבריהם. עד כאן, biblical, bring a source from the book of Job, chapter 27, verse 17, Yachin Rasha ve'ilbash tzadik. The wicked person that lent money and charging people an interest, he left that money involved with interest to the future generation. The children doesn't have the obligation to return that money to the borrower. So therefore the wicked father inherited to his children that interest money because they did not violate anything. So it means that applies solely for rebit of interest, that it's from the Torah and not rabbinic. So the Gemara said, Ad kan vetu lo, which is only biblical, no, biblical and for sure rabbinic. Ela afilu ad kan yachin rasha ve'ilbash tzadik. So for sure also the rabbinic act of interest. So the idea is the children, the Mukhe Yosef said, the children are not obligated to return, but it's still, we get ad kan ribit ktsutza. Up to this point is prearranged interest. That's called ribit ktsutza, that which is at the time of making the loan, when the lending institution makes all the application and put together the loan, which is prohibited by the Torah law, the Bedin have the force, the idea, the notion, the capability to go ahead and force the lending institution to return it to the party who gets the borrowed the money. Mikan va'eilach, from this point onward, after the person will pull out the money, avak ribit. From this point on out, it's avak, it's a secondary interest, which is, it's rabbinic. So avak is literally meaning like a dust. So it's like avak lashon hara. So it means that it's a violation, but it's a different category, it's secondary. So what we see so far, the son, the children, do not have the obligation to return that interest. The father, ribit mideoraita, the malveh, the lender needs to return. The rabbanan, the rabbinic, לא צריך להחזיר, doesn't need to return. אמר רבי אלעזר, now we see a machloket. There are those say that the Beddin have the act to enforce it. But אמר רבי אלעזר, ריבית קצוצה יוצאה בדיינים, this act of a first stage of rebit, the dayanim, the rabbinic judges through the court, so they have to revoke from the lender and bring it to the borrower. Avak ribit, however, the avak, the secondary part of borrowing money with interest, that it's in a way only quote unquote, but it's serious, it's only rabbinic, eina yotz'a bedayanim, is not revocable in court through the judges. Rabbi Yochanan amar, afilu ribit ktsutza name eina yotz'a bedayanim. Rabbi Yochanan said, even prearranged interest is not recoverable to the judges. So it means that, as the rabbis explained, that still Klapei Shamayim, the Maharsham was a great rabbi, have a long discussion, long response. He said, according to Rabbi Yochanan, if a person kidesh isha bekesef ribit, betroth a woman with money that contain an interest, so by halacha, by force of circumstance, mekudeshet, she's betrothed. Why? Because it's his money. But even ribit doraita, still. But the question is, how Rabbi Elazar treated? When it's come to ribit ktsutza yotz'a bedayanim, even according to Rabbi Elazar, if kidesh isha, if you betroth a woman with that money, mekudeshet. So anyway, there is a machloket rishonim, the early sages disputation. What does that mean according to Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan amar, afilu ribit ktsutza name eina yotz'a bedayanim. What happened to ribit the Rabbanan? Should he return it or not return it? So in short, according to Nimukei Yosef, Ramban, Ritva, Ran, if he wants to לצאת ידי שמיים, to fulfill to be sure that the heaven will not judge him, it's better for him to do it. Again, the question is, the Rashba asks, why the children doesn't have the same obligation as the father? But so he explained, when you said that Beit Din kofim oto, it means that the Beit Din tell him, omrim lo shechayav, they said to him that he is obligated to return, but lo motzi'im mamash. That's the way the Rashba said. So Rabbi Yitzchak comes in and he brings a source to the view of Rabbi Yochanan. And this is very important because here we enter soon to the subject of v'chaimach. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, mai tama de Rabbi Yochanan. What's the reason when it's come to ribit ktsutza, the pre-arranged interest, that ina yotza b'dayanim, which means that the malveh, the lending institution, the lending person, does not return the money. The Amar Kra, and here they bring a source from the book of Yechezkel, Ezekiel, chapter 18. Even the rabbis ask, Ein Navi mechadesh davar me'ata. But they said Yechezkel, it's different. Anyway, they said there, Beneshech natan v'tarbit lakach v'chai lo yichye, et kol ha'toevot az ele asa, lemitan nitan v'lo li'ishavon. Which means that he will get a heavenly punishment. But as far as returning the money, it's no restitution of that ribit. That's for Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Ada bar Ahava Amar Kra, al tikach me'ito neshech v'tarbit v'yaretam elokecha. You should not take from the person neshech and tarbit. You should feel all you got. Lemora nitan v'lo li'ishavon. The Torah pasuk said that he who takes interest is subject to the fear of God's punishment, but is not required to make amends by restitution of the interest. Rava amar migufei dekrash mi'alei. Rava said that Rabbi Yochanan infer his ruling from the wording of the pasuk itself, without restoring to the implications that we cited. Because they said in Ezekiel 18, Mot yumat, damav bo yihiyeh. They said that he shall surely die, the victim blood shall be upon him. Hukshu malvei ribit leshofchei damim. That's so deep and so beautiful. They said that those that lend on interest, that we said at the beginning of the pasuk, are compared by the text to those who shed blood. What does that mean? Because let's face it, you embitter someone else's life, he's desperate for fund, and you charge him crazy interest, so you get punished for this. מה שופכי דמים לא ניתנו להישבון, אף מלווי ריבית לא ניתנו להישבון. The same way that you kill someone, you shed blood, so that cannot make amend by restitution. The same way when you're lending with interest, it's not subject to making amend by restitution. It's like killing someone. It's a discussion among the Rishonim, the early sages, im shayach mechila beribit, if there any way of forgiveness when it's come to ribit. Because there are those who say that Yechezkel HaNavi, the Ezekiel, the prophet, he basically revivified, Hechiyah, the descendants of the tribe of Ephraim, that Yatzu miMitzrayim, that they came originally from Egypt. So it was those that was not wake up with that resurrection, because they lent money with ribit, with interest. So that's the punishment. They went to death and didn't wake up in Tchiyat HaMetim. But nothing written that you have to make lehashiv et ma shelakach beribit, to have a restitution for whatever would take with the interest. Tosfot asked, in different locations, Tosfot said, you're talking about those people who lived before Yetziat Mitzrayim, before Exodus. So at that time it wasn't any chiyuvei ribit, it wasn't any law of interest. So Tosfot said the same as Gezel, the same as idea of the 7 Noahide laws that apply to a non-Jew. And one of them is the prohibition against robbery. So that's the idea. Others said, in order lakum b'tchiyat hametim, in order to be resurrected at the resurrection, you need to have a zechut miyuchedet, a special merit. Otherwise, not. So it's It's a very well-known statement from the great Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz. He said, look, the one who lends with interest, he have a crazy life. Why? Because he is so loaded with money. He eats, he is taking care of his sleep, he wake up, all the time he's surrounded with tons of money. So he's always making money, he's always in this type of life. So why should you bother to resurrect him at the end of the days by a resurrection? Only Rabbi Yonatan Eibeshitz can say it. Anyway, the question that the Rosh and other rabbis asked is, if Reuven charged a rebit from Shimon, and then Reuven chazar b'tshuva, he is a penitent, and Shimon said, Machalti, I forgive. Is that applicable or not? The answer is for sure no, because if you take a rebit, you take an interest, you better return it. But the Rosh said, if you do it and the agreement is in advance, and then he said in advance that he forgives you, the Rosh have ma'alach, that is okay. But if Reuven collected interest, and then after some period of time Shimon said that he forgiven, it's a problem. But he said that sometimes, according only to Rosh, it's possible that he doesn't need to return. The question is, what exactly the Torah prohibited? It's because Shimon did not forgive for taking an interest from him or not. So you have to go deeper in the mindset, and that's really different between Rabbeinu Asher and others. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Yoshua have a discussion why you need the two view of Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yochanan, since we talk clearly about charging interest. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak ma'itama Rabbi Lazar. Nachman Yitzchak said, what is the Rabbi Lazar reason? So they said the Amar Kra, because we have a clear sentence, a clear verse in the book of Vayikra, book of Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 36. Page 62. V'chei achicha imach. The Torah said a very painful and strong statement. It said, do not take from him an interest, neshech or tarbit, but fear you God, so that your brother may live with you. Obviously, we talk about someone who's indigent, who needs the fund. So it means, if you do that, which is, if you did it, if you charge someone interest, in order for him to live with you, you have the obligation as a lender to return the money you took with interest, and we, meaning the rabbinic court, has the right to enforce it and follow the view of Rabbi Lazar. So the Gemara asks, Rabbi Yochanan said that when it's come to pre-arranged interest, so what does Rabbi Yochanan do with the phrase that your brother may live with you, which means you have to have explanation, since he's not speaking about the law of interest. And here we are with the subject. I'm first reading it, and then we're going to elaborate on that. Two people were traveling along the way. For our discussion, let's say that it's in a desert, but in that sense they are in Amazonas, whatever it is, they're traveling. Biyad echad mehem kiton shel mayim. Reuven carries a jar of water. Im shotim shnehem metim. If that water that left on the back of Reuven, and both of them use this water, it will not be sufficient for them to survive until they reach a place that people live. However, if one of them, either Reuven or Shimon, drink it, that person will survive, the other one will die. First view, Darash ben Petora mutav sheishtu shneim v'yamutu v'alirei echad b'mitato shel chavero. Ben Petora said something very painful, and that was the first school of thought. He said, it is better that both should drink and die, and one of them should not witness the death of his fellow. And soon you see a lot of derivative from that idea. What exactly involved? Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'limed, until Rabbi Akiva came in and came along and explained to us, no, v'chei achicha imach, the Torah said that your brother may live with you, chayecha kodmim lechayei chavercha. Imach, meaning your life take precedent before your brother. So before I go further with the tone of explanation, I would like to share with you something from my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law, Rabbi David Avram Mandelbaum, wrote so many books. One of them is the Daf al Daf. It's an explanation on every Masechet in the Shas. Here he brought the Chidushei Harim that said that because we have this view of Rabbi Akiva, he said that if someone walk and we have two people and he have a water and he doesn't need to use the water, he asks a question, what should we do? He give one of them or he should give to both? So he hold that we go back to the view of Ben Petura, that both of them should drink. But the Chazon Ish in Yoreh De'ah hold your life take precedent before your fellow's life. And the key is basically, in a way, faith. But again, before we go there, I would like to share with you a Nodab Yehuda. Nodab Yehuda was a great rabbi in the past generation in Europe, Rabbi Yehuda Landau. And he said that he was different from the din of Veheshiv et Agzela, that you should need to return a stolen item. We know in the Torah there is a concept that if someone stole something, you need to return whatever he was stolen. And now he tried to make a juxtaposition between that ruling and the ruling here. There are two concepts here, because that's the key of Nodab Yehuda here. He said, in one hand, if someone stole something, Gazalem issue, someone stole something from someone. So, for example, an item, a chefetz, and the fellow is no longer among the living. So, if you go by the returning Heshivet Agzela, obviously he needs to return the items. But when it's come to rebate, when it's come to have this issue of interest, that's what we learn from Rabbi Eliezer, V'chei achicha imach, let your brother live with you. That's the, as long as their father was alive, so there is an obligation to return. But if he's no longer among the living, he doesn't need to. So that's the chidush of the Nodab Yehuda. But Reb Moshe Feinstein also asked the same question. V'chei achicha, how you treated, we mentioned dialysis, can be many other situations. You have a sick person and you have another person that is also sick, and the potential is different between the two. How you evaluate, let's say if a person is terminally ill and using, for example, ventilation, for example, dialysis, for example, respirator, and you are shorter of a respirator, and you have another one in the emergency room that has the need. So obviously, we are prohibited to do any passive euthanasia. That's any form of killing, even indirect killing, is prohibited. So, but even a person said, or the family wish to give it to that person, he has a potential to live longer. So if it was, as Letzitz Eliezer said, it's already made in advance a decision, that's different. But if it's already hooked to one person, to disconnect him in a potential to save another person, that's v'chei achicha imach. So is another responsa from the late great Rav Waldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer, excuse me, that dealt with Dr. Meir. It was a great doctor in Shaare Zedek Hospital where my 4 out of 5 children was born in Shaare Zedek Hospital. Anyway, Dr. Meir asked the late Rav Waldenberg, the Tzitz Eliezer, a question. He said that it's a case of a person that was in a respirator, and the family gave up hope, and it's just artificial in a way. The whole functioning of the body, it's a debate among most of the doctors if it's really artificial or it's something there, but it's not really a real. Doctors never tell you that it's total lack of hope, but they said it appear potential of hope. It's very little. So they asked Rav Waldenberg what to do. Now, only giant like Rav Waldenberg can say such a thing, And let me repeat the disclaimer I said at the very beginning, that one should never pasken halacha, never rules by this lecture by any means. But Rabbi Rosenberg said, Lehasir hamonea mutar. What does that mean? When you have the nurses that comes in, and they periodically, let's say every 24 hours or something like that, they disconnected the respirator for a short time in order to clean all the secretions that come out of the lung. Okay? So when they're doing that, listen carefully, Rav Goldberg said that they do not have the obligation by Jewish law to reconnect the respirator. So you can ask, it's a different form of passive euthanasia, but as we said, we not enter that. So the Meforshim ask how this connected to the Hilchot Ribit, the subject of taking an interest. So the idea is you have the mitzvah to lend money. You have a fellow that is in a great need, you have a mitzvah to help him. But lo al cheshboncha, not in the account that makes you to be impoverished. That's the tightrope, the real balance. The person needs to make a self-search. If you have a chance to lend money without causing you to be impoverished, and that money you give it to him without taking an interest, that's a wonderful mitzvah. Very similar to that, we all know in Baltimore there is a Hatzalah organization that's in New York, in many other places in Israel. It's a question that was asked once, the Gdolei HaPoskim, the great rabbis, it was the Hatzalah organization, the BAM, and they run there and they try to help out. And one of the people, they opened the shirt and sure enough, he hooked up this Arab with a BAM. And he did it on purpose when these Hatzalah people come to rescue, to kill them. So obviously the answer is, if it's a chashash sakana, if it's the life in danger, is not the question. Obviously the potur. But if it's a chashash rachok, if it's a very far-fetched, that things like that happen, that's a different. That's the gadlut, that's the greatness of the Hatzalah people, that they taking tremendous risks by going out and try to help other people. So anyway, let's clarify this beautiful braita. It's originally in Parshat Behar, in Torah Kohanim, it's minor changes. They said as follows: Shnaim shayu malchim baderech, two people, two fellow, is traveling in a desert. Ubiyad echad behem kiton shel mayim, one of them carries a jar of water. Im shotim shnehem metim, if both of them drink, they'll not make it. Why? It's not enough for them to travel to closest to the proximate area that inhabited with people. There is a discussion why we said, because some Meforshim said that maybe Nes will occur, maybe miracle will occur. The whole idea that Chayei Sha'ah Chashuvim, that even the temporary lives carries meaning. Maybe Lo Ta'amod Al Dam Re'echa, you should not stand on your brother's blood. Anyway, so they said, V'im Shoteh Echad Mehem Magia Li'Yishuv. But if one of them will drink the jar of water, they're going to make it. So here you see a different mindset between Ben Petura and Rabbi Akiva. When I study it, I always think the difference, the mindset between the Jewish thought and others. Ben Petura said, Mutav shishtu shneim v'yamutu v'alidei echad mitato shel chaviro. It's better for them to drink. So the Netziv asked, so what do you gain? What do you gain? You're traveling on your boat. We are sitting on boats, right? You go in the ocean. You're not a great swimmer. You go there, you see someone is flipping in his boat, sinking. So what are you going to tell me? According to Ben Petura, you have to jump to the water, and then it may happen that both of you die. What's the idea? So that was the halacha originally. Now, Ad sheba Rabbi Akiva v'limed. Here we have the Ma'alach, Chazoni Shevelat of right up with this. But Rabbi Akiva said, V'chei achicha amar chayecha kodim lechayecha v'recha. Your life take precedence before someone else. So again, we have to know the nuances. What is exactly your life take precedence before someone else? I always thinking when I study it, when you go on the plane, I flying a lot. So what they tell you? In a case of emergency, right? So they said that the carbon monoxide come up, and if there's a child next to you, you should take the masks first on you and then others. So I always, before Pesach, used to teach for about 20 years in all my life in the rabbinate that they have a Pesach, a model Seder or trial Seder a couple of weeks before Yom Tov by the different schools. So I always tell the parents, you have to learn very well how to conduct the Pesach Seder properly. So you put your masks first. You should learn first. Because if you do it in a way that just for 20 minutes, then expect your children to do the same. But here we said, your life, the precious of your life, take precedence before your fellow's life. The great Gemarrah Rebbe, the Beit Israel, will put the spiritual needs of others before his own. So it's a well-known saying from the Gemarrah Rebbe. He used to say that we learn here in Bava Metzia, in our Daf, in 62, we have a case of a person who, with limited food supply, who find himself in a desert with a friend. If he will had enough foods for one person or water, so the halacha is that he may not share. He must save himself, since his life takes precedence. So that is only true regarding the physical life. However, in a case where one must choose between his own spiritual development and his friends, he is not obligated to put his own welfare first. It is often better for one to help his friends spiritually, even if this slows his own growth a bit. The great Khatam Sofer makes a similar point. Rabbi Akiva says that the verse, ואהבת לרעך כמוך, זה כלל גדול בתורה. Yes, what we see here in our daf, that he rules that your life take precedence over your friend's life. So on the surface, it seems that this is a contradiction. So does one love his neighbor as himself, or does one take precedence over his neighbor? So the idea is, it must be that the rule that your life take precedence only applies to physical life. If one can only save his life or his friend's life, he should save his own. In spiritual matters, this is not true. If a friend needs help, we should make some time for him, even if this will limit our personal growth. So that's the real sensitive different. One person asked his friend to lend him some money, for example. So that fellow said, look, with pleasure, but only if you make a minyan tomorrow. So it seems that you need some encouragement. So the borrower had already responded, I'll be there. But perhaps asking this in exchange for a loan is like taking a prohibited interest, right? Rebate. So after all, it's forbidden to lend someone money on condition that he'll give an extra coin in a hekdesh, or we learn in tzedakah, and that's where we find Lord they are 160. So why is this any difference? That's the balance when it's a spiritual or physical. So the idea is the lender admitted that he was unsure. So he went and asked one of the great halachic authority. So one of our great teacher, my great Rav Yosef Shalom Elioshiv Zatzal, he ruled, just translation from a Hebrew, he said it is permitted to lend money on condition that the borrower does a mitzvah. So for example, One can tell someone who is a Mechalel Shabbos, right? So that he will loan him some money if he will keep Shabbos or do any similar mitzvah. So this is permitted because mitzvot were not giving for pleasure and are therefore not relevant to this prohibition. So Rav Shov added, if it is normal to pay someone to fulfill a particular mitzvah, this will be forbidden. A good example is someone who's usually takes money to learn Mishnayos for a niftar, for someone who passed. So it is forbidden to lend him money on condition that he learn Mishnayos for a niftar for free. But again, that's what you see the balance here between the spiritual and the physical. It's two different things. So as we said, we follow Rabbi Akiva, that your life take precedence. Anyway, since we said the Rabbi Yochanan views when it's come to a biblical prohibition of ribit ktsutza, so we say that that interest is not recoverable. Meitivei heniach lahem aviem ma'ot shel ribit. This is such a painful question. One of them is the great Rav Sternbuch, was in South Africa, a great rabbi. I have the privilege to know him when I live in Harnof, of Moshe Sternbuch. So a fellow was the son of people who are not religious, very wealthy, and he became Baal Tshuva. So his father said to him, look, you want to sit and study in yeshiva? Fine. This guy owe me so and so money. The interest that he owe me every month is $2,000. Go and collect that for you and you have the money to live. Right? So he asked Rav Sternbuch, is that okay? So soon we're going to discuss this. But here you see an example. The father, either a lending institution or lend money to other people, and that money contain interest. That's a huge chidush. The obligation to return an interest applies to whom? To the person himself. We are not imposed upon the children to pay back the interest over a loan. But that's what we understand. Only the person is no longer among the living. Ha-avihen chayav lachzir. If the father was alive, he have to return. That's according to Rabbi Lazar, right? But the children, the Ritva said that they're not in violation, they didn't do any wrong, so they didn't have the obligation to do it. If you remember, when we study Bava Kamma, we have the view of Rabbi Bar Chama, who said that because they have, in a way, purchased the ribit with Yeush and Shinui Reshut, then that's the reason they don't obligate it. The Tosfot have also to say here. But anyway, the Gemarrah said, Bedinhu, the fact is, that even the lender doesn't need to return. That's Rabbi Yochanan views. Because the Tana learned din, this din applies to the lender. The father left them a cow, a cloak, or any other distinct object that he had taken an interest. Chayavin leachzir mipnei kvod aviyeh. Here, what do you see in the Gemara? We have a huge difference between money, that is interest, or chefetz. Remember, we studied in Kiddushin 31b that the person obligated to honor his parents even after they are no longer among the living. But here, what you see here, the idea is that in order to respect the father, people not badmouth the father, so it's different. Tanana mereisha bedidu, but the reisha, even it was lender himself, they don't have the obligation to return. V'amipnei kvod aviyeh mimechayvei. Akri kan v'nasi be'amcha lo ta'or. So the rabbi said it's not necessarily nasi, it's anyone. So they said, Be'oseh ma'aseh amcha, when the prince acts in accord with the deeds of your people, which means that he acts in a manner that is proper for your people. So follow someone who follow the Israel. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin in 86 derived from that the whole idea of mekalel al aviv ve'imo, that one who curse his father or mother, that if it's a reshoim, so he's exempt from ita. But here, you see here that the whole idea, the obligation, the Shach and others say that you have to differentiate between obligation, responsibility, or something that they do out of good heart. אמר רב פינחס משמי דרבא, בשעשה תשובה, אחרי בשעשה תשובה. So the father confesses, he repents before he passed away. So therefore, the children have the obligation to honor him. So the Gemara said, "Yasa tshuva mai bai gabei." So why he did not return it? Shelo yispik lachzir at shemed. Unfortunately, he did teshuva, but he did not manage to return it before he passed away. So Tosfot asked a question. He said, "What's the whole idea?" He said that it's that you don't have a bizayon for the father, you don't have the embarrassment of the father. But we all know the Rambam. The Rambam hold that even the father is a wicked person, the sons still have the obligation to honor him. Maran HaMechaber, the author of Shulchan Aruch, the Beit Yosef, he dealt with that nowadays is a big problem, because today we have Tinuk Shenishba, we have the concept of people who are basically Tinuk Shenishba, they came here and they don't know the difference, they never learned, they never knew anything. So obviously, you have the obligation to honor the father. But the Kesef Mishneh asked on this Rambam. He said that the Rambam tells us that we need to honor the father regardless. But here, what you see here, specifically, She'oseh Ma'aseh Amcha. So the Pnei Yoshua explained, Bava Kamma, you have to differentiate between Chayav Bechvodo, that the son have the obligation to honor his father, but when it's come to a violation, Aveira, like that, like here, the ribit, so the son doesn't have the obligation letaken, en chiyuv al son letaken, the son doesn't have the obligation, Pnei Yoshua said in Bava Kamma, to repair the mistake the father did in that way. So as we said, the Rav Sternbuch asked that question, Shem will give him a refuah shleima, he's not so well, he lives in Harnof, he was my neighbor, and Choshev Rav. So anyway, when he was in South Africa, was flourishing community as a Baal Tshuva. Ask him a question. His father is very wealthy, not religious. He lending money to people. And the father said, okay, I'm not so fan of the idea for you to sit and study Torah. He has already family and everything in Hanof. So he said originally, the father said, you want 2,000 a month? Fine, go to this fellow who owe me for money I lent him, and you can collect 2,000 dollars a month. The fellow said that's a rebate, because that's basically the interest over a large money that fellow borrowed from his father in South Africa. So the question is, he said, look, that's the money for me to sit and study, that's the money for me to support my family, otherwise I don't have other source of income. So he said to his, so what's the issue of Rav Sternbuch, who's in debate, because he said, in one hand, what you see here, the father will do it regardless. He's not religious. He will collect from that fellow regardless. So if that's the case, you have a choice between taking money that is a rebate and he sit and study, or the father take it and increase his business. So he has a big response to Halacha. I don't want to go there. He has some notion that in some circumstance it's not obligation upon the son, and if he sit and study for temporarily, he can take it. But again, this is one of the painful questions, we said it many times, that one should ask a prominent posek before ruling. Those robbers and people who lend money with interest, even they did it, they have the obligation to return, and not like the view of Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara said, Gazlanim, Amar al pi shegavu ika, I gazul gazul, I lo gazul gazlanim karidle. You have to pick and choose. Either you tell me that he's a stolen, but if it's not, so what does that mean that they have to return? So in any rate, the brighter states that interest must be returned, which contradicts Rabbi Yochanan's view. So they said, Elahem hagazlanin, mai niyum alvei beribit, af al pi shegavu machzirin. So it means that they have already collected the rebit, they must return what they have collected. So again, that's opposite of what Rabbi Yochanan said. So it means not the real gazlanim, not the real robbers, but a circumstance of people who are malve beribit, who are lending money with interest, that the Braita here call them gazlanim. So what you see here from the Braita that the malve beribit, some who lend money with interest, need to return the interest. Tanai Tanya Rabbi Nechemia Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov podrim et hamalve v'et ha'arev. You have four entities when it's come to loan. You have a lender, you have a borrower, you have here the co-signer, right? And you have the witnesses. It's all part of that deal. So we said we give them malkot, give the punishment of lashes. So that's Rabbi Nechemia Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov exempt the lender and the co-signer, even they violated a negative commandment. That's the guarantor of such loan from a punishment of malkot. Why? Because they are subject to a requirement to get up and do. So the Shoel v'Meishiv, and you see it also in many Gdolei Israel that ask this question, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov and Rabbi Nechemia, you don't see here malkot. Why? Because this is lav anitak le'aseh, but we know the Tosfot in Chulin bring the klal shelav nitak le'aseh davka aseh keneged lav shetzarich lachzir. But when it's come to rebit, it's several laving, several negative commandments. So why you don't have malkot here? So there are those who explain that when it's come to rebit, we said v'che'achicha. You have the obligation that you brother should live with you. So that's mitzvah saseh lav anitak le'aseh. So therefore you don't have the malkot. But the Gemara said lo. Here's a Tosfot here. Anyway, lo. It is tear up the document containing the interest obligation. Since no interest has yet been collected, the violation of the interest prohibition can still be undone by destroying the document containing the rebit clause. So the Gemara asks, which means that the document that awaits collection is regarded to as already collected. This is something that we should know. That's the Gemara in Sotar, we study it in 25 and Yevamot 38b. The whole idea, if you have a promissory note or you have a document and you're not collected yet, is almost like a current checks that have a postponing days. So do you consider that as though it's already collected or not? So they said, v'havdu isurayu. If you have that, so the lender and the guarantor committed the offense when they drew up the document with a clause calling for interest. If you don't regard it as already collected, so they did nothing. So why you have malkot? The shuma miltahi, that the very imposition of interest is a significant act that is punishment by malkot. So that's the idea that there's the special koach that the rebit come to have the collection. So therefore you get the malkot. We start at 9. That's the Mishnah we're going to study. It's fascinating Mishnah, page 75b, that they said ve'elu uvrim belo ta'aseh. Here I have the four entities when it's come to taking a loan with interest that they are in violation, which is hamalve, the lender, vehalove, the borrower, he'arev, the guarantor, veha'edim, and the witnesses. Now the question is, what's the each of them? So malve and love, we understand. Arev, he transferred, the guarantor. Elaedim adarevud, what the witnesses did. What is the violation of negative commandment they involve? So they said, you see that they because they signed the document, so they are responsible, shmamina. So the whole idea is when they have this star, that's the machloket. If od lo natnu, if you didn't hand it over, So you go by Rabbi Nehemiah and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So Rabbi Lazar, that what he said is you don't have malkot. Why? Because when it's come to repeat, you have a mitzvah that said to turn the shtar. So you don't have chalot, you don't have malkot. Versus Tana Kamma, what Tana Kamma said, that etzem ze shashu shtar, the merely fact that they make this type of document, that's already mechayev malkot, that's already obligated them to have malkot. So is a diyun, is a discussion among the Rishonim, the early rabbis, the Ramban and others. If someone lend money with, he write a note, like promissory note, for the rebate. So according to Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, you don't have malkot. Why? You need to, it's lavanita klase, you need to tear the shtar. Versus the love, the borrower, lavanita klase, and on the surface he deserves malkot. So how come you tell me that the love, the borrower, receive malkot, why the malve not? So the stipler, the Kilot Yaakov, which I have the privilege to know him very well, and also you see it what we study from the Reb Muni Mipshischa, the great Hasidic Rebbe, said also, because the borrower love gorem la malve, the borrower caused the lender to be in violation, lavor isur. So, but if you don't have a malkot for the love, the conclusion, maskana, you don't have malkot for the love. So the Rambam said that the whole isur, it's considering lavanita klease. So therefore, as you see in conclusion, you don't have malkot neither for the malve nor for the love. Amar Rav Safra kol sheilu bedinehem motziim olve lalove. Here you go. It says all the secular court over there, that they don't have any problem with charging in interest, right? So what they do, they sometimes in certain cases, they pull out from the borrower to the lender. Bedinenu, when it's come to Jewish law, machzirim mimalve lalove. So by us is the other way around. By us, it is we do not return it from the lender. We return it from the lender to the borrower. And he said, "Kol shilu b'dinehem en motzi milove lalove." However, any type of interest which, according to their law, they will not take away from the borrower and give it to the lender. Bedinenu, when it's come to Jewish law, we do not return from the lender to the borrower. So there are those who say that the rebate is not the oraita, because the oraita, as we said, is only rebate ktsutza. When you have a loan of a se'ah produce for repayment of se'ah, over there by their court, the non-Jewish court will enforce the repayment of the se'ah even if its price increase over the period of the loan. In our law, we do not return from the lender to the borrower. So Yosef explained, Amar lei, inu b'torat pikadon idolata. We are taking in our court, in our religious court, differently. They are regarded as though the se'ah came into recipient possession as the deposits. So that's the big difference. The Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Libracha, was asked a painful question. Someone borrowed from someone who was not observant, and he borrowed a lot of money, and then he realized that it's a rebate. Person is Baal Tshuva. The problem is, if you return the money, not talking about the principal, I'm talking about the interest, it's in violation, right? Now, if you tell him, guess what? That fellow will sue him to a regular court, and he may go to jail, he may need to pay exuberant interest. So he asked Rav Feinstein, what should we do? He doesn't want to be in jail, but on the other hand, he doesn't want to be the violation of paying in interest. So there are two eights that you have here. They said, one, he gives in order for him not to be in jail, he give him that money, not as paying an interest, just one time. Another eitzah is he said that he will give it as a gift to his friend, right? So for example, Reuven owe money to a non-observant Shimon, and the interest, for example, is $1,000. So you take this $1,000 and give it to Levi as a gift. And Levi will go to the other fellow, to Shimon, and he gives it to him just as a gift, not as a rebate. So Mimela, he's not his shaliach. He does it on his own initiation. But as we said so many times, people should have shelat chacham. People in this type of cases that you don't have a choice, you have to ask a prominent posek before ruling, because that's serious materials. אמר לאבא לרב יוסף, אמר לרבינו לרב אשי, והרי משכנתה בלא נקייתה. He said that in the case of a lender who use a property held as a pledge without reduction of the debt, דבדיניהם מוציא מלווה למלווה, which according to their law they take away from the borrower and give it to the lender. 62, ביאו בדיננו אין מחזירים ממלווה ללווה. According to our Jewish law, we do not return it from the lender to the borrower, because what we call it avak ribit, which means Rav Safra rule does not hold true in all cases. That's basically contradict your rules. Why? Because what you see, it's not ribit d'oraita, it's ribit d'Rabbanan. And therefore, who told you that they will be successful? Anyway, Amar le'inu b'torat zvine ata liyodau. So here he said that it's the pledged property. It had come to the lender possession as a purchase, mecher. So the Rav of Lemberg, the late Rav Chaim Cohen, every sponsor, Reuven borrowed 10K, for example. He gave checks to Shimon for 11K. Now, Shimon realized the problem with rebate, so he went to him and asked the Rav, since you have a check of 11K, is that the issue of rebate or not? Why? Because what we said so far, that דבר עומד לגבות כי גבוי דמי. So you see, not only in the time of the great Rav of Lemberg, you see it even earlier. The Maran Achida also it's called in those days a check mamchin. That was the name at that time. The big debate is if the person did not receive yet the check, you are prohibited to take. But if you already took the documents, so therefore you have an issue with Rebid Rabbanan. So the Rebid Rabbanan, as we learn, you do not have to return it. But anyway, אלא כל שילו בדיניהם דקאמר רב ספרא, מאית להשמועינן. So, אחרת להשמועינן, כל שילו בדיניהם מוצאים מלווה למלווה, בדינינו מחזירים מלווה ללווה. ומעיניהו בריבית קצוצה וכדי רבי אליעזר. So here we go by the Rabbi Eliezer views that he dealing with ריבית קצוצה. So ריבית קצוצה, as we said, that Rabbi Eliezer hold that it's יוצאה בדיינים, that it's a prearranged interest. So Rabbi Eliezer hold that it is recoverable in court. So the non-Jewish court enforce its payment, and we enforce its refund. כל שילו בדיניהם מוצאים בדיניהם מחזירים, ריבית מוקדמת, advance interest, וריבית מאוחרת, and subsequent interest, whose payment the non-Jews will not enforce. Consequently, we do not enforce its refund. So since it's not ריבית קצוצה, it's basically only rabbinic. So it's a common question. I know that they ask the Rabbonim sometimes. A fellow borrow money. Let's say Reuven borrow from Shimon. He visited Shimon's shul. And guess what? Shimon gave him a very beautiful, special, expensive aliyah. So he asked the Rav what to do. So the Rav said to him, in that case, he should buy an equivalent aliyah to Shimon, so that he will not be in violation of rebit. But I would like to conclude with a beautiful take in the story of the Khatam Sofer, which we mentioned many times. You have the head of the community, as we said here, it's like the president of the community, also Talmid Chacham. He came to Khatam Sofer and he said that he needs to marry his child, and he is really desperate for fun. So the Khatam Sofer right away pulled out a large sum of money as a loan. And he said, this I saved for my children, I don't need it now, you can use it now. And the fellow traveled to a different city and was a merchant, and he makes a lot of money, and he returned with much more money that he can marry his children. Was very, very thankful. So he bought a very expensive jewelry, and while the Khatam Sofer was sitting in the Beis HaMidrash with his students, he came back and in front of everybody, he thanks so much the Khatam Sofer for lending the money, you saved me, you saved my life, and he blessed and blessed and blessed, and he gave him this expensive jewelry as well. So all the students was there, amazed and shocked. Well, the Khatam Sofer, what's he going to do now? It's a ribis. So there's a moment silent, and the Khatam Sofer said, I thank you much more. He says, I always pray that I can show my student an example of ribis mu'cheret, of this type of taking an interest. So he said, I have a monthly salary. I don't have the worry that you have as a merchant. And he said, now you make a special zchut that I should not take any type of ribit or any type of interest. So he said, look, the Torah said that kaspecha lo titen beneshech v'tarbit lo titen ochlecha. We have two separate prohibitions. One is neshech, one is applied to the slender, one is applied to the borrower, as we learn. So he said, here is back your jewelry, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to show and demonstrate to all the students how one should not take ribit over lending money to another fellow